Good afternoon, everybody. As Tom said, I am, in fact, Natalie Higgins, and I am working as the Records Management Lead in NHS Scotland's M365 team at present. I have worked in records management for the past 10 years, and as sad as it sounds, I really do feel I have found a passion, not just a job, which I thoroughly enjoy. What I'm going to talk to you today about is my thoughts on how we can use some of the challenges that are facing organisations to improve records management. I plan to outline some of the examples of these challenges, how they link to records management, and then give some ideas about risks and mitigation to get buy-in for records managers or records management in general. I will do my best to keep this to about 15-20 minutes, but as my granny would say, I can talk for Scotland. So Tom, if I am going over that, please feel free to jump in and cut me off. And just a quick disclaimer, not that I think I'm going to say anything controversial, but these are my professional views and not the views of my employer. So we will get into it. What I was going to talk to you first about was looking at the challenges for records managers. Now, I'm sure you are all very, very familiar with this uphill struggle. And I'm really concerned at the moment that our current data landscape is getting worse, I suppose. We are increasing the data that we are creating and storing at a rapid rate. There seems to be a lot more than there was previously, especially prior to COVID. We're now using a greater mix of platforms with our IT, bringing in many new systems and apps, but we're also storing all that information in emails and shared drives, and let's not get started on Teams chat. And also for many organisations, we've still got a lot of stuff in paper. So all these shiny new tools in my eyes, and the fact that we still have things in paper, is leading to greater fragmentation of our records. I think there's a lot of duplication, and we're still holding on to a lot of out-of-date and redundant information. Tends to be, in my opinion, that the view around bringing in new systems and new tools can be quite short-sighted. I have a fear that we are quickly losing the track of what we have and where it is. We've not got that oversight anymore. And scariest thing of all, we have switched on AI. And I don't know that that's going to make things any easier. But wasn't it all just easy when all we had to think about was just emails and shared drives, and we thought that was hard? So what I want to talk to you today about is the fact that I think it's quite hard to convince our senior management colleagues of the significance of the challenges that we're facing, which I have on screen. So some of the ways that I think that we can do it is to tap into other organisational challenges, link them to records management, and then get the buy-in that we need. So just some of the challenges that I've came up with that I'm going to talk you through today are on screen. So these are challenges that I'm looking at that are on top of the day-to-day operations of an organisation, such as their kind of financial challenges and making sure that they're doing everything that they should be. But I think that we should tap into some of the examples I've put on screen in order to get our senior management attention. I'm going to talk you through each one in turn and describe how I think it links to records management and how records management could help to minimise and limit the risk. I don't think we could always mitigate. I have used the word mitigate in my slides, but I think it's more about us limiting and minimising it. I have put on the slides and when I'm describing these in detail about some of the mitigations, but please don't be mistaken. I know that you will all be more than aware of what mitigations there are, and you already have many of them in place, but it was just for completeness of the slide because I'm adding in that risk part of it. I thought I would add in how we could link that to some of the mitigations, but as I said, you'll already be aware. So I'm going to talk you through each of these in turn, starting with legal investigations. So I believe that right now our organisations are under greater scrutiny. So even before we get to legal investigations, I'm sure that you all be experiencing this, that we are receiving potentially more complaints than we did previously. There are a lot more, or seems to be quite a dramatic increase, I hear from our freedom of information colleagues, and freedom of information requests. Um, Seems to be an increased scrutiny on governance. And then comes the legal investigation. So if I think about just the NHS in Scotland over the past number of years. It's not just recent. We've had things like the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry. There's been the Infected Blood Inquiry. We've got the ongoing COVID inquiries. There's been the Scottish Hospital inquiries, and there's also investigations that happen from a workforce point of view and into individual members of staff and things. So we are under this increased scrutiny, and it's not until this scrutiny happens that there is then a sudden panic and we realise the issues that there are in gathering all the evidence that's required, because that is the expectation. When a legal investigation commences, they are generally looking for written evidence, as well as obviously some uh, information from individuals verbally when they interview them, but it's the written evidence that is quite key. And if we look at some of the outcomes of recent inquiries, so sure a lot of you in the call will be aware of the recommendations that were in the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry, which then led to the redraft of the Public Records Scotland Act. The Infected Blood Inquiry was similar. It also highlighted recommendations around improving record keeping and records management. With other investigations, I am aware that there has been a legal investigation, and towards the end of it, when it was all the evidence was produced, it was realised that there was 20,000 different documents produced as evidence, and I don't think organisations realise that when they first go into the investigation. I think there was another investigation recently where unfortunately records have been destroyed, which were part of the ongoing investigation. So it is really, really crucial that we highlight the links that legal investigations have to records management. The ability to provide records as evidence, and this is only based on as good as your records management. And I think one of the risks we have is that information can often be stored in the wrong place. It's that out of sight, sometimes out of mind as well. But if you think about, and I'm sure you will be able to relate to this, the fact that there's a lot of information stored in emails and people's desktops, now in OneDrive, which can be hard to get a hold of. And an even scarier thought is when those people leave the organisation, then quite often that information goes as well because it's in the account which is deleted. So I think this is one of the challenges that you can use to get buy-in. I think we could speak to those who deal with the investigations in your organisations and highlight this risk, explain that to them. But you're not just going to them with a risk, you're also going to them with the solutions to the risk, so how you can help to limit that. So having information asset registers in place, all the policies, guidelines and training that I'm sure are already in place, so things about appropriate storage, having appropriate naming convention and version control in all your documents, and highlighting to the people that are involved in these, look, I've got all this in place, we just need to promote it more, and then that will help support the legal investigations. We'll be able to find information more efficiently and we'll get the right information at the right time. So that's one example that I think can be really, really helpful to tap into. And if you get the buy-in from these people, then that can help raise a profile. Another issue is not quite as well known at the moment as some of the environmental issues that are being faced by organisations, particularly in relation to sustainability targets. So Scottish Government have set a target of net zero emissions by 2045. That's predominantly focused on waste emissions and travel. They're not really calling out data at the moment, but I'm sure you're all aware that it is starting to become more prevalent and more recognised. Loughborough University, if you've not looked into any of their work, you should, but they have highlighted that globally data centres consume more power than the entire UK. And one of the stats that they put out is that most data centres contain about 60% of dark data, and that's data which has been used once or not at all. I think we can relate that to some of our organisations as well. So as that starts to gain momentum, there is going to be a risk that some of the organisations, if they're hit with these targets, they're not going to be able to achieve them because they have so much data that is being stored. So again, do you have sustainability managers in your organisation? Do you have people that are looking at how they achieve the target of being net zero? Approach them, highlight to them that there is a risk there that they're not going to meet this for data. I think one of the things I said earlier was emissions, and obviously that's linked to electricity. So how much electricity has been used by your organisation in powering servers full of data that you might not actually need to retain? So again, it's about getting that buy-in, highlighting to the people in charge of these targets that with better records management, you can help to achieve some of this. So I'm sure you already have your data cleansing processes in place, the retention schedules, and I've put on there about the sharing of and access to files, and that's about training people to share files or providing that more open access to files appropriately, not obviously personal data, so that there's not as much duplication instead of everybody emailing 20 versions of the same or one document to 20 people so that everybody's got 20 copies of it. So it's about tapping into this. And I think that's another way that we can get records management onto people's radar and highlight it. And you're posing it as helping to eliminate this risk, but actually you're just getting records management improvement in place. This might not be applicable to all. I appreciate not all organisations right now will have a lot of paper records, and you might not be going through a kind of hybrid working or reduction of estate, but this was an opportunity that I experienced in the last organisation I worked in. Obviously, the challenge for organisations right now, they're under huge financial pressure. They are looking at a reduction in estate, and that is being they're able to do that now because of the ability to facilitate a lot of home working. So it was actually 10 years ago when I first got into my records management post, I recognised that paper records were not held in a central area, and they were quite scattered across many different buildings. So I did ask, could I have a space to store all these records? And I was quite rightly asked what kind of space, what size of space, and I didn't know at that point. So I had to go away and do a bit of work. And I did do a bit of work, but it was not seen as a priority. There was no money to invest in it. And there was a lot of other things happening in the organisation that came first. But lo and behold, fast forward to quite a few years, and we're in the situation we're in right now, where that hybrid working is being facilitated, and this was the opportunity I needed. So I did approach people who were dealing with the hybrid working and the decommissioning of buildings and things, and just asked them that question, well, what are you doing with the paper records? Outlined that risk, but at the same time as outlining the risk, I said, but here's what I can do, and put in place all the things that we could look at a centralised storage area. I can do a survey, I will complete a report, we'll look at shelving, and putting all those things in place and giving them an issue but also a solution at the same time meant that lo and behold, although it did seem to be 10 years in the making, they did sign off on a centralised storage area, and that meant that the paper records, although it is still ongoing, I didn't get to complete it before I left the organisation, but it does mean now that the management of those paper records is significantly improved, and within the organisation they will now know what they've got and where it is, and be able to easily access it instead of the situation that there was before. So again, if in your organisation you are hearing about this, find out who's leading on it and go to them with this risk, but make sure you back up the risk with what you can put in place. You might already have lots of these things in place, but it's helpful to outline it to them, because sometimes I feel that as records managers, we do lots and lots of works on guidelines, processes and procedures, but we often feel unheard, and it's maybe because we're not shouting about it to the right people. But certainly that was one thing that I felt was really, really helpful, and it was just tapping into a different challenge, but helped records management significantly. Oh, a further challenge. This is quite a scary one for all organisations, and it is a significant challenge that we're all facing right now with the threat of a cyber attack. Um, I feel that with organisations, quite rightly, they are focused on um, the actual security digital controls that can be put in place, but they don't always think of damage limitation. So unfortunately, with cyber attacks, sometimes it's not an if, it's a when, and this is where again records management can come in. So we've got this increased threat, we've got an increased digital estate, where there is obviously more and more encouragement to make everything digital. There's a lack of understanding of sometimes where things are held, and we're also holding on to, in my experience, far too much information and holding on to things that maybe we should no longer be retaining. So this is where records management can play a key role, and I would strongly encourage people to highlight to their security colleagues and also senior management that, look, we are putting greater information at risk because we don't have full buy-in for records management. We might have the processes in place and on paper, but they might not actually be adhered to. So this is where you can approach these people with and highlight the risk and then outline what you can put in place. I think it's important to make sure that the organisation has their retention schedules in place and they're trying to limit the data. But there's also that fact of knowing what is held and where it is, so that if in a situation where a cyber attack did happen, then the organisation knows exactly what information is at risk and can put in appropriate business continuity and disaster recovery plans, and potentially where personal data is involved, notify the information commissioner's office appropriately. So again, tap into that and highlight where you can add value to minimising or limiting the risk with that challenge that organisations face. And the last one I'm going to touch on, and I'm aware of time, I have went slightly over what I said I would, but digital transformation. This is a significant challenge right now. I think a lot of organisations are pushing towards it, but we don't seem to always have the appropriate resource in place to do it. And it is, in my eyes, leading to further fragmentation of records, which is bringing other challenges. So can you use this to your advantage, though? And one of the things that most of us will all be facing right now is that introduction of Microsoft 365. This is a massive opportunity for organisations to influence IT colleagues and digital colleagues to change practices and look at how records management is not a blocker to the digital transformation. It's actually an enabler, and it can support the adoption of these tools, and that's how we get to thread like records management into IT training without it seeming like something that they're being told to do and that's all about compliance. So I think it's really important right now that you highlight some of the risks that there are with some of the digital transformation that you'll be going through and the introduction of new tools, and some of the limitation there for the challenges. Get yourself involved in products. Tell your colleagues where you can add value. Take actions away that you can do. Thinking about the data cleansing processes, so the less information there is to migrate, the quicker and more efficient it will be. Thinking about putting the naming convention and version control guidelines in place for the new digital platform. Also, what about file plans and metadata? These are all things that you can tell them, look, I can look into that for you. And it feels like sometimes they're then able to offload some tasks and some actions, which everybody's always happy to do. So that's where you can again get in there, help to minimise their challenge, but also in turn improve records management for the future with these new tools. So I went through that quite quickly. But in summary, I think right now it is really crucial that records management is considered in all organisations, because there's a huge increase in data and a lack of thought about how we're going to manage it for the future. Um, I think what I want you to take away from this is go and think about what are the main challenges that your organisation's facing. How can you relate them to records management? Who is it that you need to speak to? And then tell them about the risks that they're facing, but also how you can support that and what actions you can undertake, but what buy-in you need as well. And hopefully that will help you to make the records management improvements in your organisation that you need to. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm more than happy to take some questions now.